James.
All right, we are live.
All right.
All right.
Let's get after it. Are we live?
Just give me 1 second here.
Okay. We're good, Billy?
We are good.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the latest episode of the RocaNews Show. We are your hosts.
Lucky. I thought I was going to.
Hey, buddy, how was school?
Sorry, Billy, something's going on in the background here.
Yeah, it should be good now. Sorry about that.
We'll do it one more time. Hey, everyone, welcome back to the RocaNews Show. I am one of your hosts, Max Frost.
And I am another one of your hosts, Max Toohey, and we are thrilled to have you for what is our first live interview today. We will be interviewing a prominent whistleblower attorney, and she will have some fascinating insight into the case of OpenAI whistleblower Suchir Balaji. But before we get to that, we have some news to cover for you, and let's kick it off, Frost.
All right, so first, and this may be the only time we talk about Charlie Kirk today, the firings. A lot of firings are happening in the wake of the Charlie Kirk assassination. So far, United Airlines, NASDAQ, the Washington Post, MSNBC, and Office Depot are all among the companies that have confirmed they have terminated employees for statements that they have deemed inappropriate about Kirk's death. So perhaps the most high profile of these was Matthew Dowd, who MSNBC fired the night of the killing. Subsequently, the Washington Post, who fired columnist Karen Attiah after Attiah tweeted out a quote from Charlie Kirk that was misquoting him and was relatively, I'd say, inflammatory. But in any event, they are gone, and this is becoming an increasingly controversial thing, especially after Vice President J.D. Vance called for people to call employers to report those who said nasty things about J.D. Vance's death, about Charlie Kirk's death.
Yeah, and then you, of course, had U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi sort of echo what J.D. Vance said, saying they're going to target specifically those guilty of hate speech, specifically hate speech around Charlie Kirk's death and assassination. So that has obviously been a big story. We've talked about it a lot, and we are well aware that some of you are Charlie Kirk assassination out, so we don't want to overwhelm you with that story today. But instead, we want to talk a little bit about, before we get in, of course, to the whistleblower attorney, we want to talk about Kash Patel's testimony. So, Frost, do you have any insight on this? Kash Patel testifying before Congress?
Yeah, so there's multiple things going on here with Kash Patel right now, who is one of Pam Bondi's employees as the director of the FBI. He's testifying both about his handling of the Epstein files and the investigation into Charlie Kirk's assassination in Utah. So just to give you some facts on this, on Tuesday and Wednesday, Democrats mainly criticized Patel's handling of the Kirk assassination investigation, particularly his actions on the night of the shooting. Now, there's lots of clips of people kind of grilling him, yelling at him, the way these congressional hearings always go. One representative pointed out that while the suspected shooter remained at large, Patel was dining at a Manhattan restaurant and was not at FBI headquarters. Definitely not a good look for Mr. Patel. Patel also faced criticism for incorrectly posting on social media that the suspect was in custody. And now it's funny that he's being called on to testify right now. Obviously, he and Pam Bondi both are really in the hot seat. They were even before this Kirk thing over the Epstein files. So these are not popular people in the United States of America right now. Would you say, Tui?
No, and it's funny because we've also covered a story recently about how this first Trump term, well, specifically the first year of this Trump term, has seen much more stability than the first year of his previous term as president of the United States. Far fewer firings of high-level administration officials, no turnover at the chief of staff post. If you recall, Trump started out his first term with Reince Priebus, formerly the chairman of the RNC. He gets Trump apparently to the extent that you can trust this reporting, but he allegedly would talk about Reince Priebus scurrying around the Oval Office like a rat, and then also, you had Anthony Scaramucci in his post as comms director for like 10 days. And essentially, you had all this turnover in the first term. You had several cabinet members step down, and you just had all this chaos. And this has been a much more stable administration, generally speaking, with the exception of the Matt Gaetz sort of pulled nomination and a couple other issues like that. But now you're seeing some serious heat from his base toward both his attorney general and the director of the FBI. So this could be the biggest sort of speed bump, if you want to call it that. Some might also call it just a straight up debacle. But this would be the first big sort of shakeup in the Trump White House if Patel and Bondi don't make it through all this.
Yeah, the Patel thing to me is particularly funny just because I remember listening to Steve Bannon talking at the time that Patel was nominated, and they were like, there was no guy they were higher on than Patel. And they wanted Patel to be the attorney general. I mean, they were all fired up about him. And now they pretty much turned on him 100%. In fact, I heard Steve Bannon say recently, I want the old Patel back.
Wow.
So that's a funny angle there.
Well, I always wonder sort of what happens to people when they get in office, because it makes me think, I remember saying this when we were on Julian Dory's podcast recently, talking about this, like the equivalent of Kash Patel saying Epstein killed himself, he wasn't murdered, and basically saying there's no smoking gun in the Epstein file. That would be the equivalent of Dave Smith or Tucker Carlson getting into the office and all of a sudden becoming adamantly pro-Israel. Like, that's pretty much the equivalent. And so the question is there almost like more corruption, or is there far less than we realize? And it really depends on your starting point with the government. If you have a friendlier view of the government, you might just say, oh, these people in these hot air balloons get in there, and then they realize it's actually much more complicated. There are other considerations that the public can't be privy to, or that there isn't some grand conspiracy. It's much more bureaucratic and narrow than people think. Or if you're very skeptical of the government, they feel all these threats, they feel the intoxicating effects of power, whatever it might be, and all of a sudden they totally change their tune and give into it. So anyways, it really depends on your starting point with the government. But that's essentially what's happened, is they've totally shapeshifted. And so that's where we are now.
It is. And the other place we are right now is Google AI wins coding competition. Now, this isn't just any coding competition. This next story here, it is considered like the Olympics of coding. They bring together the world's best coders, have them try to solve problems. This year, for the first time, AI won, and it defeated all the human beings there. Specifically, it was AI. It was the AI model Gemini 2.5 DeepThink. So it correctly solved 10 out of 12 problems in the 5-hour competition, winning gold. It beat many of the world's most prominent programmers and leading experts in this stuff. So it's worth noting the AI system wasn't an official competitor. However, it ranked against the other teams and it won. So just one more thing to think about. They always said, learn to code, but now it looks like if you learn to code, you're probably due to be unemployed soon.
It's really an unbelievable, sad turnaround. I mean, I remember even as recently as 2021 and 2022, but really 21, where if you were a coder and you were semi-competent at your job, as a 24-year-old, you could be getting this huge payday, huge juicy payday that Google, Amazon were hiring like absolute lunatics, and that they were paying people enormous amounts of base salary and giving them juicy stock packages. Well, anyways, it was golden time to be a computer coder, and then all of a sudden now it's like, hold on, we don't really need you anymore. AI's kind of taking a lot of your jobs. It's not even that helpful to even know what you know.
Do you think that there's a chance that things are, it's become like the meme of like the liberal arts major, right? Who can't get a job, who studied something kind of worthless, and like, they want to be a journalist, or they want to be, whatever kind of liberal arts type thing. Is it possible they're going to end up with the upper hand because the tech computer science crowd is really, everyone says, ripe to be disrupted by AI?
Totally. I think, and it's funny because in the chat right now, you have somebody saying that computer science is going to be the new gender studies. I think that it's so hard to predict because I remember in 2021 saying like, geez, maybe we should have studied computer science for us, or we could have done it. And now it's so clear that may not have been the right move. So it's hard to make any prediction, but I will say this. I think there's something to the idea of studying a major that really forces you to think, that teaches you intangibles, that I think gives you more of a zero principles foundation that can help you problem solve in a world where a lot of those, more focused problem solving jobs like coding and engineering are solved by AI. And so thinking about it from a more macro level, whatever equips you to do that, that seems to be the future. Or just go the complete opposite end of the spectrum and learn how to plumb or something like that.
Yeah, you know, the only
plumbing.
thing I would say in defense of the coders is like even now, like when you're trying to build stuff with AI systems, like people who have like a background in CS are so much better off.
Definitely.
Whereas if you know nothing, it's extremely difficult. It takes you way longer. Whereas if you have at least a basis in like how this stuff works, you got a huge advantage. Okay. Biggest story of the day.
So exciting. Juicy.
For the first time this year, the Fed cut interest rates. Now, this has obviously been something President Trump has been demanding for a long time and threatening to fire those at the Fed, attempting to fire one of the Fed's governors over this. Well, today the Fed finally cut rates. It did so by 0.25 points. And this is big. I mean, this is something that people have been talking about for a long time. I think specifically what a lot of people are looking at was how Stephen Moran, a Trump nominee who just got on the board, would vote. So now for this guy, Moran, he works at the White House. Someone on the Fed board resigned. The Fed board, which is the Open Market Committee, which is tasked with setting rates. One of the people on there resigned. Trump got to appoint an interim replacement, not permanent, just until I believe January. But Trump appointed someone in his office, Stephen Moran. Now, Moran did not resign his position before taking the position at the Fed. He just took a leave of absence. So essentially, he's acting as Trump's man at the Fed. And so today, the Fed votes to cut rates by 0.25 points. Now, again, this is the benchmark rate from which pretty much all of their interest rates in the country follow. But Moran dissented, favoring a half-point cut. And Jerome Powell said, quote, "We're strongly committed to maintaining our independence." A lot of people, though, are definitely looking at that. I mean, that's Trump's message right there. We don't want a quarter point. We want a half point. So what do you think about this?
Well, I think it's been funny to see the Federal Reserve become a reality show. Like, of all the places you wouldn't expect any sort of political drama, I think the Federal Reserve would have been the safest from that. And now all of a sudden, like you had that when they were going into the renovated Fed building and you had the two of them looking over the floor plans and Trump was talking about the discrepancy in spending and, you know, and all of a sudden Jerome looks at it again. So you had that moment. And then now you have Trump just turning up the pressure on Powell 100%. And it does seem to be an overstep. I think some would say, I mean, I must say, if I were a better historian of Federal Reserve history, maybe there was another time where a president was so heavy-handed with the chairman. But what I'm reading is this is the most. What'd you say?
Nixon famously, essentially controlled the Fed governor, and so we wrote about this at one point probably back in I think April when Trump was really saying he's going to fire Powell. Well, I guess Trump said he never said it, but everyone else said he said it. Nixon essentially. A lot of people blame Nixon with causing really high inflation because he pressured the head of the Fed to keep rates low. Then after that, we had the stagflation of the 1970s and all that. So people say that's kind of a precedent for what Trump's doing. It's not that what Trump's doing is totally unprecedented. It's just that when it happened in the past, it didn't go well.
Super interesting. Well, that'll be fascinating to see what happens next there. And yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think that Trump had a line the other day on the South Lawn where the reporter talks about the hate speech issue, and they're just like, they say, President Trump, what do you think of the new statement from Pam Bondi on hate speech? And he goes, well, I think we should go after people who go after me, and you go after me quite a bit. I'm kind of butchering his quote, but he goes after but like I obviously Trump has his way, and he tends to like that way. And Jerome Powell's independence, especially Trump, was always, he sort of every president has their pet issues. Trump's has had, I think the one nearest and dearest to his heart, honestly, is trade. That's one he's been railing on for the longest period of time. The one he won 2017 on largely was immigration. Debatably, same in 2025, along with some social issues like transgender issues. But I think interest rates are also right next to, as a real estate guy, he knows his stuff well. And so I think it really gets under his skin that he doesn't have more control over it. So
one thing I would just like to say briefly, and kind of potentially in defense of the president, and this is something a lot of people have been pointing out, is that, everyone's saying that now the Fed's independence is under attack and all this kind of stuff. It is worth noting that the Fed has not been apolitical. I think this is a point that a lot of people have been making, and kind of not just conservatives, kind of a more nuanced take on this. The question is, have they been independent and apolitical on setting the interest rates? I don't think people are really criticizing that aspect of it. However, you do have a lot of people coming out, in the Trump world, and again, a lot of them, they have lots of evidence of this.
Right.
I mean, the Fed really took the DEI stuff on. I'm looking here, I got it in front of me. It's the Fed's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategic Plan. Quote, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategic Plan reflects the Federal Reserve Board's strategic initiative on DEI, which is a shared responsibility of all board employees. And what a lot of people are saying is that this stuff was already working its way into Fed stuff. I think that's a bit of a stretch to say out of DEI they were doing X, Y, or Z with the interest rates. That being said, politics have been here, I think, before.
Well, that is super interesting to note. And I also, just a fun fact I always think about, that you had from Georgetown Prep over the span of 4 years, high school in the DC area, you had Brett Kavanaugh, famously. You had Neil Gorsuch, so 2 Supreme Court justices. And then you also had Jerome Powell. So this era,
Wow.
I mean, imagine that Georgetown Prep campus.
Were they
right
there at the same time? They're probably similar
around
age.
the same time. Gorsuch older than Cav, and I'm pretty sure, I don't know where Powell fits in. My guess is older than both. Probably roughly the same
maybe.
age. I remember it was roughly the same time span. But anyways, kind of a goated setup there. Also, we have St. Pablo in the chat saying, I lost my job as a Philippines customer service agent to AI. And we send our condolences to St. Pablo, although we are glad that you now have free time to join the show.
So just so you all know, too, the whistleblower attorney, Mary, will be joining us in 5 minutes. So just stay tuned for that. And, before we get there, we want to play a couple clips. Should we look at the Tucker one first? Or, wow, there's 2 Tucker ones. But
I think we could definitely look at the Tucker one as like a great warm-up to it. The first 2 minutes of this one, maybe. Here we go. This is him, of course, with Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI.
You had complaints from one programmer who said you guys were basically stealing people's stuff and not paying them, and then he wound up murdered. What was that?
Also a great tragedy. He committed suicide.
Do you think he committed suicide?
I really do.
Have you looked?
This was like a friend of mine. This is like a guy that, and not a close friend, but this is someone that worked at OpenAI for a very long time. I was really shaken by this tragedy. I spent a lot of time trying to, read everything I could, as I'm sure you and others did too, about what happened. It looks like a suicide to me.
Why does it look like a suicide?
It was a gun he had purchased. It was this is like gruesome to talk about, but I read the whole
That's all right.
medical record. Does it not look like one to you?
Comforting
Tucker's
He was definitely
faux
murdered,
empathy.
I think. There were signs of
all right.
struggle, of course.
Here, buddy.
Surveillance camera, the wires had been cut. He had just ordered takeout food, come back from a vacation with his friends on Catalina Island. No indication at all that he was suicidal, no note, and no behavior. He had just spoken to a family member on the phone. And then he's found dead with blood in multiple rooms. So that's impossible. Seems really obvious he was murdered. Have you talked to the authorities about it?
I have not talked to the authorities about it.
And his mother claims he was murdered on your orders.
Do you believe that?
I'm asking.
I mean, you just said it, so do you believe that?
I think that it is worth looking into, and I mean, if a guy comes out and accuses your company of committing crimes, I have no idea if that's true or not, of course, and then is found killed and there are signs of a struggle, I don't think it's worth dismissing it. I don't think we should say, well, he killed himself when there's no evidence that the guy was depressed at all. I think, and if he was your friend, I would think you would want to speak to his mom or...
I did offer. She didn't want to.
So...
Tucker.
Real quick here, just a few facts on this for those who haven't followed this case. Suchir Balaji?
Yes, Balaji.
he was a 26-year-old who killed himself last fall. He was an AI prodigy from the Bay Area, graduated UC Berkeley, joined OpenAI in 2020, helped build some stuff there. Resigned in August 2024 over ethical issues. In October, he accused OpenAI in a New York Times interview of illegally training ChatGPT on copyrighted data. The Times is one of the biggest critics of this, has filed a massive lawsuit against OpenAI, and they named him as a witness in that. A month later, he's found dead in San Francisco from a gunshot to the head. He bought the gun post-resignation, police say. Official autopsy ruled it a suicide. However, his mother does not believe that.
So this is a fascinating case. And what we're really excited about with this interview here is to just get more of a broader viewpoint on whistleblowers in general, because we had spoken to this attorney, Mary, before, and she has some fascinating things to say on the psychology of whistleblower, on the sort of mental duress they undergo after blowing the whistle, so to speak. And so we're going to get her perspective on it and her insight into this case in particular. So cannot wait to talk to Mary here. And we got Billy. She's lucky. She gets to look at Billy for this whole conversation instead of the two of us.
It's a very unfortunate reality.
Billy, can you just play for a few seconds the clip of his mom talking to Tucker Carlson?
Add up if he's so brave to go to news media, to be a witness. He's so courageous. How does someone so courageous do a cowardly act? It doesn't add up at all.
What doesn't add up is there's blood all over the apartment, and there's a piece of a wig on the ground covered in blood. That's not his wig. And, you know, you don't need to be a detective to imagine that if someone's going to commit a murder, he might be wearing a wig as he goes into the apartment. So that right there, considering your son didn't wear a wig as a 26-year-old male, you know,
hairs were not his. That's also another thing.
What weren't his?
Those hairs were not his hair. We have the picture of his hairs. His hair is fallen down in the bathroom sink. That is different from the wig in the hair in the wig. His original hair have been found on the floor. They might have strangled him by his hair or something. His hair has fallen down. That hair versus the wig hair are different.
So she's not buying it. She is not buying the official narrative. And the question we have is it justified to not buy it? And we're about to hear it. So Mary's here. We'll have her on in 1 sec.
So we're going to let her in here. All right, Mary, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Billy. Good to see you.
You as well. So you're going to be on the screen here. You can only see me, unfortunately. However, you're on the screen. Max and Max are here as well. They're going to do most of the questions, but it's great to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I did listen to your earlier episode where you talked about Suchir Balaji, so I'm up to speed.
Wonderful. Well, Mary, thank you so much for joining. Our first question is, could you talk a little bit, just so the audience has some context on your work, a little bit about your work as a whistleblower attorney, how you got into the space, and the capacity in which you work with whistleblowers?
Sure. So the moniker of a whistleblower lawyer actually is an umbrella that covers a lot of different areas. So I'm glad you asked. My specific lane for whistleblowing is I serve essentially as a matchmaker. I help whistleblowers with valuable information get paired with the various U.S. government agencies who pay them largely as confidential informants for that information. So whistleblowers who have information about securities law violations, as we know, in the wake of the financial crisis with the creation of the Dodd-Frank Whistleblower Reward Program, can bring tips to the SEC. And if the SEC uses that information, they can receive a percentage of any fine imposed as basically a finder's fee for bringing the information forward. So that's the kind of whistleblowing I do, and I've done it for 30 years. And I kind of fell into the space after having an amorphous view and going into law school wanting to change the world and realizing that lawyers are often the folks in the room where a lot of the change happens. So And I was fortunate enough to find the world of whistleblowing, and the world of whistleblowing coincidentally has also expanded exponentially as the SEC, the IRS, and now multiple agencies, including the Transportation Department and the Treasury Department, are seeking tips from whistleblowers for information about violations of everything from sanctions, violations to trade violations to defective cars. So even the Trump administration just a few weeks ago adopted a new program about antitrust violations. So there are now 9 or 10 programs. So it's definitely a growth field. I didn't know that when I was jumping into it, but it certainly has been one of the few bipartisan issues. Senator Grassley has been one of the longest standing, most vocal proponents of whistleblowers. But, it's hard on both sides of the aisle. No one is pro fraud against the government. Most people are pro enforcement, and whistleblowers blow the whistle on all sorts of targets and seek to protect the government's interests. And that's something it seems like most Americans can get behind.
So now, when a lot of people, when they think, for like the average viewer of this, when they think of whistleblower, they think of some certain really high profile cases. Obviously the stuff with Boeing now, this OpenAI case, and so on. And a lot of people immediately, they jump to foul play, right? Someone is testifying and then they die. Someone blows the whistle and then they commit suicide or whatever. What do you think? Is it fair to jump to kind of the assumption about foul play in this? Or do you think, how do you look at it when you see something happen, say the case with OpenAI, or just generally when you see something happen, how do you think about it? Do you jump to foul play or not necessarily?
Yeah, I usually don't. And part of that is just from my experience and seeing that the pressures that whistleblowers are put under are magnified, much like a pressure cooker, and often lead to suicide. We've seen that in many different areas. So it's not to say that there couldn't be foul play, but there unfortunately are a number of examples of high profile whistleblowers committing suicide, including, I think most recently and vividly in American imagination, is a gentleman, the Boeing whistleblower, John Barnett. We have since seen, as you continue to follow the evidence as the case evolves, in his family's wrongful termination lawsuit against Boeing, we actually see his tragic suicide note, which basically says in many different scrawls, a lot of writing, and one of the margins says that whistleblowers need more protection. So I think it's hard if you've not worked with whistleblowers or been a whistleblower to sort of understand how this plays out. So for most of my clients, what happens is they blow the whistle internally, usually first with their employer, expecting to be applauded, right? I'm identifying a risk, I'm the canary in the coal mine, and you should be able to correct course. And then they're completely disoriented when it seems to be across the industry. There's a corporate playbook where corporations decide to make it about the whistleblower. So instead of the whistleblower shining the light and saying, look over here at the wrongdoing, it ricochets back at them and you are the problem. I mean, it's as old as the medieval concept of shoot the messenger to divert attention from the message. So that can be enormously disorienting, but also companies, when they make it about the whistleblower and trying to minimize their responsibility, they're also trying to send a signal to future whistleblowers to chill them. Like, you don't want to be like, Billy, who just reported on this and now has been put in the equivalent of Siberia in the workplace and will quickly be on his way out the door and not to have another job. So whistleblowers lose their social connections at work, often are blacklisted. And then you can imagine how they're greeted at home if they have partners and families to take care of. Why did you do this? You put our family at risk. We can't get another job. And things can quickly spiral downward. So that's why I don't jump necessarily quickly to foul play without looking at the facts. That said, Suchir Balaji's case is not, to me, the typical case. He did seem to resign. I don't know enough about what pressures he was under. So it doesn't necessarily follow the standard playbook that I've seen.
As
You know,
in
there's
as in
a
he
number of other cases we can talk about, including one of my clients is Tyler Schultz, one of the Theranos whistleblowers. There was a suicide, people may recall, of a chief scientist named Ian Gibbons, whose wife did speak out after his suicide, who was trying to raise concerns. So, you know, it's often these environments like OpenAI, like Theranos, and including, we've seen this in law enforcement, where there's a test, and Boeing is similar, like a test of loyalty. These places are less like companies and more like families, workplaces, where it feels like it's very disloyal to speak out. So I think that can sort of add to the pressures.
When you talk about the pressures that these whistleblowers face, what specifically can a company do? And I'm not doubting the effects and consequences of social isolation and ostracization at work. That can be a terrible thing and weigh on the psyche. But what kind of levers can companies pull to make whistleblowers feel that immense weight of the world that might drive them tragically to the point of suicide?
Yeah, so it's interesting. You know, I know earlier this week or last week, you guys on the show were talking about, you know, Sam Altman's interview with Tucker Carlson. And so before we get into what they can do, I should say what they shouldn't do, which is Sam Altman, there were 13 whistleblowers who spoke up about basically clauses that were included in confidentiality and in employment agreements, where OpenAI was basically silencing dissent illegally. The SEC has rules that say that, and they fine companies for including this kind of language that prevents people from bringing their information to the government. So you need to first do no harm before I can start talking to you about affirmative steps you should be doing to be helping. And so that is just an example where we've just seen the use of NDAs and just setting the wrong tone, is that we want to squelch all dissent. And then, you know, especially in the case of these big tech companies, when you have vested equity, you know, you're not going to threaten that when most of your salary is going to be invested equity. So first of all, make sure your policies are in place, that they are actually legal. And Sam Altman, you know, did a big oops, I'm so embarrassed, I didn't know, after this was reported. But, you know, it took some very brave whistleblowers to step out and break those NDAs, and the risk of, you know, getting sued for that. My client, Tyler Schultz, you know, when he spoke out, he ended up, his family, because he was very young at the time, ended up, you know, having to mortgage their home to pay over $300,000 in attorney's fees to defend against a cease and desist order in a violation of confidentiality agreements. Tyler famously said fraud is not a trade secret, and ultimately prevailed. But that wasn't until his family had to incur over $300,000 in attorney's fees. So I think you first, as a company, need to make sure you're following the law and not putting those impediments up. But affirmatively, what can you do? You can set a culture of respect where you actually welcome people who are raising concerns. And you can change and sort of flip the script. And instead of seeing whistleblowers as disloyal people, you should see them for who they are, which is among your most loyal employees. Because who but a whistleblower has the temerity to sort of speak up and expose the potential risks, when everyone else has sort of drunk the Kool-Aid and has said yes. So these people are allies, and there's actually a lot of empirical data coming out of George Washington University, the University of Utah, that actually says companies, that it's actually advantageous to the company's bottom line to actually use whistleblowers in this way as risk management tools, because you you're more profitable, because you avoid more lawsuits, you avoid the brand management that we've seen companies like Boeing suffer through, and you can course correct. So if I were in a company, I would get my compliance officers to get on board, and knowing that these people should be your allies, not your adversaries.
Yeah, Boeing, you can imagine, had Boeing listened to the complaints beforehand, they could have saved them an awful lot of headache and money and whatever else they care about. But so you said before or just to get back to Tui's question, in terms of like the tools that they have. So someone comes out, they blow the whistle, and then the company wants to retaliate or whatever the term would be, isolate that person, discredit that person. What did they do to them?
So we've seen everything from the most juvenile. So it can be just firing them right on the spot. Most state laws, you have at-will employment, so they will come up with a pretextual reason for firing you. A lot of my clients have had, fantastic end-of-year performance evaluations year over year, and as soon as they speak up, all of a sudden they're a troublemaker. They're not a team player, and the fact that you've been chronically late your whole career all of a sudden becomes a problem. So that's one form of retaliation. We can also see something called constructive discharge, where basically all of your job responsibilities are taken away from you. So you're all of a sudden not invited to these meetings anymore, and you're given very trivial menial work as a way to try and sort of drive you out. But the most juvenile one I've ever heard of was a whistleblower who worked in the first Trump administration in the White House security detail, providing security clearances to new incoming Trump employees, including Jared Kushner. And the woman who refused Kushner's clearance based on that she'd worked on multiple administrations and basically said he didn't satisfy he raised some of the red flags and couldn't be approved. When she was retaliated against because she's a woman with dwarfism, people started to put all of her files out of reach. So it can get enormously juvenile and very pointed. And it can continue after you've left your employer, right? This is where the sort of almost the most insidious is the blacklisting that can happen, right? As you go on to try and get another job, and in the whisper network, people are going to say you don't want to employ Mary, Billy. They are known to raise concerns. They're not team players, and then you end up largely being blacklisted. And unfortunately, too many of my clients who may have PhDs or have gone to the top of their careers in finance become dog walkers.
Which is just bizarre to hear, obviously tragic. And there's so many interesting cases you've covered and are working on, from Theranos to Boeing, to kind of cover the stories that have made national news. Since we're thinking about the OpenAI one, and when you look at that whole situation and you see the clip with Sam Altman and Tucker and just generally everything having to do with Suchir Balaji, are there any red flags? You talk about, like, generally speaking, OpenAI suppression of dissent and anyone speaking out against a company. Are there any red flags from either the reporting you've seen about the death of Suchir or about Sam Altman's handling of it, or anything else? What has OpenAI done that you find objectionable, if anything?
I mean, I like I said, I think they're almost the gang who can't shoot straight, right? I mean, it started with 13 whistleblowers, front page of the New York Times, coming together to say that they had engaged in a campaign of stifling dissent illegally, including language in their employment agreements that prohibit people from speaking out. And remember, most employees who read that don't know those provisions are illegal. Right, you have to actually go to a lawyer, and that lawyer the right lawyer has to tell you those are actually not enforceable and actually in turn violate law. So we don't know how many people they have silenced over the course of the 5 years that those agreements were in place. So I don't start from a place of Sam Altman being in good faith and wanting to register complaint and hear from people who have concerns, right? And we've seen that. Once those agreements were finally held to be illegal and changed, we've seen another outpouring of more whistleblowers. So, and that is what brought the next wave, which is Suchir Balaji on claims about copyright infringement. He was supposed to be, as you mentioned, a witness for the New York Times copyright trial. So I feel like Sam Altman, in his interviews with Tucker Carlson, missed a huge opportunity to actually, show that the company is willing to be a tiger that'll change its stripes, and talk about whistleblower protection. And instead, turned it on Tucker, saying, "Is this an accusation?" and other things. It just was, as you mentioned, it was not well handled. So it certainly seemed like a huge missed opportunity, and I'm just not sure there's the humility there, and it to actually be wanting to empower people from the inside to actually hold them to account. What the other interesting fact for your listeners might be that we really need Congress to step in here. There is a bill circulating right now trying to allow the right to warn to be available to AI whistleblowers in particular, because whistleblowers often don't get legal protection against retaliation until they're reporting on something quote unquote illegal. But we know that in the AI space, which is moving so quickly and is not being regulated vociferously at all, it's more dangerous for AI whistleblowers to speak up because they may not get those protections. So Senator Grassley has pushed a bill forward. It's got bipartisan support that would seek to recognize that, in fact, whistleblowers may be our best eyes and ears in letting us know an early warning system for problems. So in short, I don't see OpenAI being really sincere in feeling and learning from its past mistakes. And there was an opportunity to, talk about the tragedy of Suchir's passing and, do something that recognizes the importance of these folks. But instead, it was just more of the same.
Yeah, it almost seems like there's a trend within the AI industry of people quit to then create it seems like there's a trend of, I guess, people leaving to then go public or spend more time warning about things or whatever. When ideally, I don't want to say ideally, I don't know what's better, but theoretically, you'd want those people in a place like OpenAI. You don't want to force out everybody. They're creating technology that some people say could destroy the whole world. And those people keep leaving. You've seen it. I know it's happened at DeepMind. It's happened at, I believe, Claude, and it's happened at OpenAI, where you've had people leave warning about the risks of the technology they're creating. But again, now those people are on the outside, and the OpenAI juggernaut is going to go raise another however many $1 billion and keep doing what it's doing at a faster and faster rate.
100%. And unfortunately, past is prologue. We've looked at, social media has been through this. We see how Meta has not changed its behavior. One of our clients is Frances Haugen, who's one of many Meta whistleblowers who raised concerns, testified in front of Congress, and Meta continues to, with one of the most recent whistleblowers, actually a gentleman, it was on the front page of the New York Times last week, who is head of privacy and cybersecurity for WhatsApp, saying that Meta violated the FTC's order in the wake of the Cambridge Analytica scandal by not protecting the data. So, and I think that's who Sam Altman looks at, right? He looks at Zuckerberg and seems like he seems to be able to do this unscathed. So there aren't a lot of deterrent examples. And so I agree with you. I would love for there to be a place where whistleblowers could feel more safe to do this on the inside, because they'd be much better at protecting us in that place. We need them on the inside, not all out on the outside. How we get there is that we need to continue to have organizations like nonprofits like PSST.org and other nonprofits that really seek to hold whistleblowers' hands and be whistleblower whisperers, because it takes a village to support these people when David's decide to take on Goliath.
Mary, I hate to take you out into conspiracy waters, but as my final question, do you believe that Suchir was murdered, or based on your ample experience with whistleblowers, does this fit a typical pattern of whistleblower suicide?
I don't want to punt, but I feel like I don't know enough of the basic facts to make a statement here. And I so feel for Suchir's family that I just don't, and I actually have appeared at their conferences and things like that I really don't want to say.
Totally understand that.
And I have one last question for you, which is, so whenever any of this stuff happens, right, and especially us being in this business, so if we put up a story about anything that happens whenever a whistleblower dies and we write about it, and the comments all fill up saying essentially call it what it is, murder, whatever. And then the other half of the audience will say, well, that's all conspiratorial thinking. That's not real. Are there instances in modern America that where it's been confirmed that you have had corporations or governments or I don't know, let's say corporations in modern America that have violently retaliated against whistleblowers? Are there any cases that have been confirmed of that?
I'm not aware of any in the United States where there's physical violence. No, not aware of it.
Interesting.
That's really interesting.
Well, that certainly undermines anyone whose first instinct is to go to the company killed them in cold blood, no matter how cynical your view is of big tech or big defense or whatever other industry, big pharma, the whistleblower works in. So that is helpful context on something like this, as strange as it may sound. So that's super interesting to hear.
I would want to say that it's interesting. You don't have to resort to physical violence to not really undermine their mental health. So you may recall in John Barnett's case, he shot himself in his truck on his way into his deposition. So it was day 2 or 3 of depositions. He was trying to prove up his case of retaliation.
This is
and
Boeing.
so you
Joe
can
Barnett is
imagine sort of the pressures that someone is under to relive that of being not believed and sort of being subjected to very hostile questioning. The other thing I would raise is I've actually witnessed, to my alarm, I represent a number of whistleblowers who work for big healthcare companies alleging Medicare fraud. And I started to sort of interview them on questions of gaslighting and what had happened to them. And I had 2 of them separately tell me that they'd actually been subjected by the healthcare company to a psychiatric evaluation when they refused to go along with the company's behavior. Wow. So that's literal gaslighting, right? There must be something psychologically wrong with you. Everyone else seems to be able to get in line with this fraud scheme, but not you. So there may not be physical violence, but there's enormous amounts of intimidation and like litigation. These companies, there's a huge disproportion, inequality of arms that you can sue these people for breach of confidentiality agreements, theft of documents, all the number of things to bury them. So there's a lot that you can do short of physical violence to send them on a path of self-destruction.
Very well said. Well, thank you, Mary. That's really, it's really interesting to talk to you and super relevant. I mean, I feel like right now this is a topic that's really on a lot of people's minds.
Yep. Thank you so much, Mary.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I'm really enjoying the show.
Thank you, Mary. All right. Wow. That was super interesting. I don't know whether to feel like more cynical or less cynical toward companies, because on the one hand, it is telling that there has been a lot of investigative reporting on, these whistleblower deaths, and that there hasn't been one confirmed instance of boom, company hires hitman behind the scenes, kills whistleblower. That on the one hand maybe makes these cases seem less morbid and Tucker's line of questioning a little more extreme or knee-jerk. But then on the other hand, how repeatedly these companies just pressure and do what they can to basically silence people or cast them out and make sure they don't get a job again. Crazy.
Well, two thoughts on that. One thing is, as with so much of this stuff, it's also possible the truth is in between, the two ends, right? So you've got Sam Altman saying it was a suicide. It's rules. That's it. There's nothing. I'm so sorry. He was a friend. There's also no evidence that they were actually friends. I mean, he joined OpenAI. He wasn't like an early guy there. He's a lot younger than Sam. So there's that whole narrative. Oh, it's such a tragedy. Then there's Tucker's essentially implying you killed him. And then there's a good chance, who knows? The reality could also be in between where, like she said, they mentally broke him. And they didn't have to inflict violence because of what they did to his mental state. A second thought is, in a lot of ways, if you think about it, it's similar to the way a lot of governments act against dissidents, where in Russia, there's once in a while you hear a case of, the government actually kills somebody. But that's not common.
Totally.
And there's what's much more common is they leverage their power over corporations, over the media, over whatever, to ruin your life. And then you deter one person, you see the fate that will befall you if you run afoul of the government. then everyone else is like, yeah, I'm not going to do that.
You know, I think a perfect visual of this, and this is what you're talking about, was so powerfully captured in the HBO miniseries Chernobyl, where the scientist and bureaucrat who bravely told the truth of what actually happened, and that there was a fundamental design flaw in the nuclear reactors that had to do with its emergency system. That was the key testimony, as opposed to human error, and it was a bad look for the Russians. And essentially, they pressured those two people so severely. One was already dying from radioactive poisoning, but the other radiation poisoning, but the other, he ended up killing himself, and it was a suicide. But it was a suicide because he'd become an outcast who was being watched and who had lost all favor with the government and lost every post he had and became a nobody and lost his money, all of it. And so to your point, it's like, what, did the government kill him? Yes and no. I mean, immediately no, but indirectly, yes. So I think that's an outstanding point with Sam Altman. So this is a fascinating conversation with Mary. And Billy, did you have any thoughts?
I think your hat's a bit off kilter, but other than that, no. You guys, I think those were great questions, and it was awesome to hear her speak about this stuff.
Totally.
Good stuff.
I'd love to hear the Theranos perspective. Like, how did people listen to Elizabeth Holmes? How did she do it? That's honestly impressive. It's more impressive that she pulled that off and got that many investors than if she would have actually invented a technology that could diagnose any disease from a drop of blood. That's actually more impressive.
Maybe we should see if we can talk to that guy.
Yeah, that could be great. So forget the fraud. How do you pitch him? Yeah.
Okay. Anything else for today?
I think that's it. We've had some a little more idle of a chat today, although we love Colby. Colby, your question was essentially answered by her right when you asked it. So whatever you put out into the universe brought it back. But shout out to Max Hudgens being the most engaged member of the chat today. Rob, get him next time. Hudgens may have been spamming a bit. And I believe Hudgens was also the one who took a shot at the Latter-day Saints yesterday. So he may be just playing catch-up. So anyways.
May have to report him to his employer.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, thank you everyone for watching another episode of the Roca News Show. We should have said this earlier, but subscribe.
Amen.
Like and subscribe while you're here.
Amen.
Wow. Yo Mama So Fat 897 says, love you. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate
Yo
that.
Mama.
And Hudgens celebrating. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining. As Max Frost said, please subscribe. Billy just sent a heartfelt love you in the chat. And have a wonderful day. And guess what? We will be back